And, with all the history we have, with the 14,000 pairs of shoes that we have in our archive, and that reminds us every year of that creativity and that pursuit that was done from all the family members, including my aunts and my grandmother and everybody. Always a constant reminder of our job, our ability to bring this forward in terms of legacy. Having lived essentially all my life next to my grandmother, it was a recurring theme. You would all the stories and all the that was transcended for me became very natural in joining the family business. And so even when I was very young, I was working on the production line, learning how to make shoes. I made my first pair of shoes actually for my grandmother.
Today, I'm honored to speak with James Ferragamo, third generation of one of the most iconic luxury brands in the world. From his grandfather Salvatore's early vision to his grandmother Wanda's leadership after she passed away, James shares how the Ferragamo family has preserved harmony, identity, and growth across decades of change. In this episode, we will explore what it takes to institutionalize a family business, build trust between generations, and balance family heritage with global ambition. If your family faces similar questions, such as succession, governance, or alignment between generations, I invite you to connect with me. I have spent over 18 years supporting family businesses through these exact transitions. Now, let's dive into this extraordinary story. Thank you for being here, James. You being third generation of an iconic brand internationally that was born almost 100 years ago, founded by your granddad. So it's an honor for me to be with you and hear your story and what's been the challenges that as a family has faced along the 100 years of this journey in the international luxury environment. So welcome, James.
Thank you. Thank you very much for including me. And I'm really happy to have a chance to talk about my most favorite subject, which is my business and Ferragamo. So thank you again.
So, James, let's begin. Your granddad was born in a little town close to Naples called Bonito. He was an entrepreneur all his life. He began making his first shoe at 9 years old for her sister, as I read about it. And so the journey of his life was of challenges and open markets and discovering the world. So let's begin by that on that story, so you can walk us through this incredible journey of 100 years since Ferragamo was founded in 1927.
Actually, on Spotify, there's actually the audio recording of the book, and it's called "The Shoemaker's of Dream," and it really talks about him and his life in shoemaking. And in the preface, which is actually read by my aunt Giovanna, it says, he's first and foremost wants to be remembered as a shoemaker. For him, making shoes was his passion, his life ambition was to become somebody that was making shoes that were different, out of the ordinary. So he was extremely focused in doing just one product extremely well. And sometimes it's an amazing example for many generations that are starting their career and having that luck of actually knowing what he wanted from a very early age, and was at the age of 9 in Bonito making his first pairs of shoes for his cousin first Holy Communion. They were very poor, where he was one of 14 kids and they were living off 10 acres of land. And but he says in the autobiography, he believes he was a shoemaker in a past life because it came to him so natural to make shoes. So I think that's something that explains that passion that obviously has to be at the forefront of everything that you do, in terms of being able to make something which you want to do and spend many times doing it. Without passion, you're probably going to have a tough time putting that dedication and time to it.
It's incredible. That's one of the challenges that we as fathers of our kids want to inspire them to find their passion in life, to make what we want to do in life. And your granddad Salvatore, he found his passion at a very early age. So I was reading that after that, several years after that, he moved over to the States, and after studying shoemaking in Naples, and then he opened a market and learned more about shoemaking in Hollywood and in the early 20s.
Absolutely. He was actually a sales person in a store in Naples at the age of 11. And as many of his brothers and sisters had done in those years, they migrated to the United States, which was the land of opportunity, as they called it in the early 1900s. And so he wanted to go over and work alongside the new movies that were being created in Hollywood. Actually, a brother found him a job in a production line in Boston where they were making shoes in a series. And he said, I thank you because, finding a job wasn't actually one of the easiest things to do, but this is not what he wanted. He wanted to do something which was out of the ordinary. He wanted to make shoes that didn't exist yet. And so he was given this opportunity to go across country, and he went to Hollywood as the first films were being made, and he started making shoes for the first actors and actress. And he made shoes for the 10 Disciples, which was one of the first movies in the 1920s. And those actors then became customers because they found his shoes comfortable. For him, comfort is something which always has been at the center of what he wanted to do. He didn't want to just make beautiful shoes. He wanted to make sure that they were comfortable. And so he studied at the University of Berkeley the anatomy of the foot because he wanted to understand those, I think it's 26 different bones that we have in our foot. How do they all work? And how do you make so that the shoe is comfortable when you're wearing them? And so there he began, and he started making shoes and selling them at the Hollywood Boot Shop, which was on Hollywood Boulevard. And then demand grew strong, and he decided to then return to Italy. And he chose Florence because Florence for him was actually where a lot of artisans were based. There was a lot of that ability to make the bindings of the books that are in the Uffizi, which had special leather that was worked in a certain way, or amazing upholsterer that knew how to make furniture. So a lot of artisans that he could, painters at the same time. And so he was able to have a dream and create products by collaborating with them. And so there's a famous shoe that he did for Judy Garland in 1936, which was a period of the Second World War. And so during those times, he had a shortage of material. The shoes actually have a steel shank that supports the arch so that the weight distributes evenly between the toes and the heel. And because of the weapons that were being produced for the war at those times, there was no metal available to do this. And so he created a wedge. And so for him, that need of using different materials became really a want of doing things which were out of the ordinary. And so this is an amazing shoe. It's called the Rainbow Shoe. And it's done on a triple plateau. She wasn't very tall, and so this one really gave her a big lift. And it was done with people that knew how to do upholstery because it's all made out of little pieces of wood that then are all glued together and stitched together, covered by little pieces of leather that he made it into a rainbow color.
Incredible. The first workshop, it wasn't a store; it was a workshop of doing shoes, as I read about it. And this building eventually became the foundation of the building of the foundation, the Museum of Ferragamo, or it's another building in Florence.
Actually, he started in another area in Florence, and when he began, unfortunately, he wasn't successful. But he went bankrupt. I think he went bankrupt twice, and so he failed. But his determination was so much that then he was able to come back and redevelop the shoes and everything. And one of the objectives was to have an important headquarter, such as Palazzo Ferroni, which is still today our headquarter. And so he was able to purchase this building in 1937. And he actually organized a production line on that floor, on the first floor, with a fresco ceiling. I mean, you could
Hmm.
see this building today. It's where we have the most important meetings, and he had a special room where he would meet all his customers, and he would lay onto the shoes, all the shoes on top. And so you would have, there's pictures of Audrey Hepburn that comes and visits him here in Florence, and he's holding her foot and understanding the different measurements and what was she like. And because she was very tall, she wanted to have a ballet shoe with a wrapping leather on the sole, so it symbolized very much of a ballet kind of ballerina shoe for her. And he was able to do all this production inside that building. Of course, it wasn't something that was very sustainable in the long term, because it used to be actually the headquarters of when Italy was the capital, when Florence was the capital for Italy in about 160 years ago. That was the town hall, and so that building then now is actually where we have also our exhibition. Currently, we actually have an exhibition about Salvatore Ferragamo and his life, most important shoes that he actually had created, and some of the achievement that he was able to make. And it's where the family also holds an office in that very same building.
So unfortunately, your granddad, the founder, passed away at an early age at 62, and you weren't able to meet him and spend time with him, unfortunately. But the role of the woman, and now it's a huge topic nowadays, leadership of women. But your grandmother took the roles of the company and made it and was for many years was the chairman, honorary chairman of the company. So how do you see the role of the woman at that moment, and how do you can comment with us little perspectives of your grandmother that you had the chance to interact with her a lot?
Yeah, so she was really an incredible woman. She unfortunately died in 2018 at the age of 96. But she was so dedicated to fulfilling the dream of her husband. And she was in the office on Wednesday and died on Friday. I still remember the days, because she was so determined to always be there, and together with her sons and daughter, bring forward the legacy of her husband. They were together probably for about I would say 20 years. Yeah, they got married when she was 18 and he was 42, so there was a big age gap, 24 years difference. And she came from the same city, town actually, where he was born, in Bonito.
Hmm.
And when he returned from the States, went to visit Bonito, and met her, and immediately they fell in love, and they got married, and started and had 6 kids together. And she was only able to sit next to him in the last years, when she understood that time was coming to an end, and wanted to create a continuity. And you can imagine in 1960, which was the year when my grandfather died, she was actually thought that she would not be capable of bringing this
Okay.
forward. But a lot of the people that worked with her, a lot of the people that were the artisans working on the shoes, cheered her on and said, we will make this happen. We will support you. And she was somebody with an amazing eye for the product, an amazing sense of the business, and brick by brick was able to actually bring the business to grow in. And as the daughters joined the business, she gave them all different responsibility. Fiamma on the leather, Giovanna on the ready to wear, Fulvia on the silk accessories. And the 3 sons, one was responsible for Asia, one responsible for America, one responsible for Europe. And so they worked as a matrix, so that every market could sell 3 different products, and every product could be sold in the 3 different markets. And so this was actually a way that she describes as making sure that everybody feels they have a place. They are an entrepreneur in their own right in the family, and can contribute in an active way to the success of the family. And this is what she put in place, and then it was something that coming up to my generation, which was the third generation, and statistically, third generation is where most times things
Disappeared.
end. And so, from a statistic point of view, and so how do we find a way that we can limit this? And what are those key elements we need to put in place to ensure that this doesn't happen? And so one of the things was to limit the 23 cousins that we are to a maximum of 3 that could have an active role into the business, having worked with another company so that you have that understanding that you need to report to a manager, even within Ferragamo, when you do get a job in Ferragamo, and respond to deadline, perform, and so you have and requested also to have a master if possible, so and proficient in English and all kinds of things. And so that was a way that was done to ensure that the entrance of the third generation would be as smooth as possible. And in the same time, also the need to diversify. And we went public in 2011.
But let me go up a little bit in time. And
Sure.
what do you think were the key elements when all your aunts and uncles and your dad were working on the company? There was no best practices at that time. There was no books that you could read about. You can do this, and these are the best practices for a family business, because that began 45 years ago, not more than that. So, what do you think was those elements that your grandmother gave your aunts and uncles as a same purpose? What do you think was the key element in that sense?
Well, I think she always described it. Says, she would say, none of them were forced to come and work in the family business. They did it if they wanted to. And so if you talk to my father and his brothers and sisters, they're like, yes, of course. But then, of course, it wasn't really very much of a choice. We had to because we wanted to contribute, and we had also our heart in the right place to be able to support her in that moment. And everything that she had done to make sure when they were small, because when Salvatore had passed, the eldest was 17 and the youngest was 2 years old. And so they saw the struggle and the effort she had made in keeping the brand at that point alive, because the designer wasn't anymore there, and was able to also understand and be able to keep the antennas always open, and understanding more than just the grinding of the daily activity. Where was the world going, and how were the things, the luxury business changing? And so for her, it was natural to say, and it was also a little bit of a dream of Salvatore. He says, I won't be here for the future, but I want to be not just remember the brand for its shoes. I want to have also extension into handbags. I want to have also an important component of the men's lines, the belts, the ready to wear, and the silk accessories and so forth. And so that was his vision. And she always says, I always felt him next to me, guiding me in this direction. And so I don't know if he was really next to her or it was her that had always the antennas ready to actually understand that she needed to find a different proposition. And so many brands struggle with the fact that you don't have the creative talent there anymore. You lose your creative juices, and how do you remain relevant and credible to a customer base? And she was able to actually make it into a brand and started developing different symbols for the brand, such as the shoe with the bow, the Gencini belt, and the shoes and the moccasins that we all know today as key elements of a branding concept. And so, as the industrialization moments were developing in all different markets, she was there with the possibility of expanding the markets and the products and the distribution.
And in terms of governance, because one of the best practices for family business to transcend from generation to generation is that if you have to do one thing, is put some governance structures into it. So who was the leader in the generation of your father to say we have to put some structure here, some rules like the ones you mentioned before of how many can work in the company, what are the rules for them to work? How did that happen in that moment? And if your grandmother were still alive and was part of those discussions?
She was very much, my father would participate in this different committees of family businesses. And he noticed that from when he started, a lot of them would not participate to future meetings because the family business would not carry forward. And so this was something that, for him was a clear sign of how important it is to be prepared and find the right situation so that you can arrive to those succession issues before it becomes an issue. And it's always been a question of being preventive rather than having those difficult conversations when you are in a difficult moment. Because then it becomes exponential, the complexity that you need to resolve. And so I think that ability to having confronted those discussions back at the end of the 90s, which was an important moment of growth, was something that was done with much ease and also was done in a moment where none of us from the third generation actually had a role into the business. And so it was done in a way that there was nobody which was already working in the business. There was a good moment for the company. And so it was an easy discussion. And the preparation also for the understanding also succession, well, that's something that I think it's always very complicated in family businesses. You need to understand how do you manage that between who wants or should exit and who should or wants to enter. And so that's difficult to relinquish. I made the example of my grandmother was in the office until the very last moment, and the heart is there. And so you have to understand that how do you not allow somebody that has dedicated all their life and their heart to do that, to not be present and to give them the right respect in being there, but also helping them to understand that succession and generational change is a question of really passing on the baton to somebody that can probably put more energy in it in a specific moment as you change over to other generations.
It's a huge topic and a huge challenge for any family business, the succession topic. And what would you recommend the families? How do you begin this process or this way of things? Family, we have to sit down and talk about succession, because sometimes the word itself would mean you want to get rid of me, or am I gonna die? Or how do you begin those conversations? How did your family solve that in that moment?
You need to find a way to probably, I would say that probably the most useful is benchmarking, talking about, this is natural. We're all here temporary. It's a path of life, and we all want to leave our marks, and we all want to make sure that we are able to have brought forward a legacy in a certain way. How do we prepare ourselves to do it in a way that it's done correctly as the complexity evolves? Usually you start by one and then you develop it in our case was 6, and then you have 23, and as 23 we have 40 kids, and those 40 kids probably will have about 80 to 120 offsprings. So it becomes exponential. And so what you applied between generation 1 to 2 and what you applied from 2 to 3 needs to have a sense of organic approach to it. It needs to also be able to say, okay, well, this should not feel like a prison. It needs to feel like something that allows you to move forward. It needs to also have a possibility of diversification, such as we've done also in the hotel business. And so possibility of having other interests and developing other things in the real estate part. And I think it's that's should be the right approach, and also have the right approach that it's not just family. It has to be done together with management. You need that professional support. And so you have to also acknowledge that we all have limitations. And then the sooner you acknowledge those limitations, the better it is in terms of ensuring that, we're all trying to maximize the performance for all stakeholders. We often talk about the supply chain, and who has worked on Ferragamo and has produced their products has been doing it for 60 years, and we value them even if they're not part of the group. We still value them as if they're integrate part of the group, because their success is our success, and so it's almost another family that we have, which is extended to the existing family. And so you need to be able to plan this as you move forward in a preventive way. I think nepotism is another issue that needs to be neutralized. And sometimes, we also had a professor from the Bocconi University and other professionals that help on that aspects and give an honest feedback in terms of how the person can perform and what are their credentials and what are their abilities and where are their areas of their biggest strength, and so focusing them more on what they can actually do to support a legacy that needs to move forward.
And having all these processes and governance projects and a succession plan already set up, I think it set up the base in order for your company, your family company, in order to become public in 2011.
Right.
Well, I'm sure that those conversations were not easy. Should we go public or not? Why should we go public? Are we going to lose control or not? So
right.
How did those come? Because you were part now in the company, you were working in the company at that time. I'm sure you were part of those conversations. How did that conversation come out? Say, okay, we have to go public, and why? What were those things that you were thinking about? Your family was thinking about. There was a right path to go public.
Public, being public, I think it gives you a lot of options. First of all, it allows you to monetize, and in that case, we only monetize about 30%, so we still maintain a majority ownership. Actually, 35%. We consider our partner also in Asia that purchased 6% of the outstanding shares, and it gives you the possibility of also being flexible. So it is a market that allows you, if you do want to diversify, if some family wants to diversify, it's fairly straightforward. So it's not as complex as it being a privately held company. And so it gives that ability to be able to also have that organic approach in terms of being able to say, okay, well, yes, if other interests that somebody has in the family can be managed better also in that sense. Also, what I was mentioning before in terms of nepotism, being public also requires that you have a CEO, and what we created also in terms of a family pact was that role should be given to an independent CEO. And so having that independent CEO has always helped in making sure that it isn't just a family, and having also a lot of independent members on the board also allows to ensure that we're not following a legacy that has no business, but following a legacy that can be driven also by the family above, if they're part of a holding company, or below the CEO, such as in my case, that has specific roles and responsibility that then have to report to the CEO in such a way.
So let me make a pause here and let's talk about a little bit about yourself, because you took a path very close like your granddad. You went over to the States to study. You work outside of the company at Saks Fifth Avenue. So how do you got like in love with the Ferragamo brand and say, this is also my passion, my purpose in life, and I want to work in that sense? And why go to the States to study and not stay in Italy, where the fashion industry is, the luxury brands are born? So what tell us a little bit about you, and how do you decided I wanna go into the Ferragamo company?
I would say, well, having lived essentially all my life next to my grandmother, it was a recurring theme. We would go over and have this dinners with my grandmother, and she had this long, narrow table where she would sit at one end, and my grandfather would have sat at the opposite end, and then my father would sit at that end when my grandfather wasn't there anymore, or any other members of the family which would come, and all the stories and all the hardship that they all went through, but also the passion that was transcended for me became very natural in joining the family business. And so even when I was very young, I was working on the production line, learning how to make shoes. I made my first pair of shoes actually for my grandmother. Actually, being half English and half Italian, I made two pairs, one for each, and so it was, and so I learned at a very early age how to make shoes, and it's so rewarding to be able to use your hands. I think if you're somebody that knows how to play an instrument or is able to make a shoe, or it's something that definitely is very fulfilling. And so that's something that I would do during the summer holidays. And then I would work in the stores when I was in New York. We opened a store in Rodeo Drive in 1990, and so was a salesperson there in the store, and I had so much fun, living at the age of 19 in Los Angeles, and so being able to talk to the customers and understanding what the customer wanted, and really having that ability to say, okay, well, this is what this brand is all about. And so from there, I wanted to also have an experience in retail, and so that opportunity with Saks Fifth Avenue came up, and at the time, Rosemary Bravo was the CEO of Saks, and just merchandising the stores and understanding the value of inventory and how to move inventory in and be able to tell a story that is compelling to the final customers was something that I really cherish in terms of learning experience. And so from that experience, working then in a family business was something that I applied for, and I was then confirmed.
So you build up your own skills.
Yes, absolutely.
So, and diversification is one thing, and I've seen that your family is also in the hospitality business, because your uncle at one point several years ago bought a beautiful hotel now under the brand of Rosewood in Il Bosco, I think.
Yes, Castellón del Bosco. Yes.
Castello del Bosco. I had the opportunity to be there once and visit the vineyard and all the stuff. But I see that your father, in 1993, bought Il Borro wines, where I think your brother and your sister are the ones in charge of that. So you're diversified as a branch in the Ferragamo business, or it's also part of the whole Ferragamo holdings?
No, well, we have had many different diversifications in the family. So each branch has done different things. So Massimo, which had Castellón del Bosco, Leonardo had also the Swan, so the Nautor, all the boating and the shipyards, and my father instead, always having had a passion for the country, decided to buy in 1993 the property, which is Il Borro, which was part also of the property of the royal family of Italy. Mm-hmm. And he was able then to restore it, and he's been investing in it ever since. And it's really a beautiful part of Italy that has really become a gem in terms of being able to provide amazing hospitality in a small medieval village tucked in on the Prato Magno, on the backbones of the mountains in Italy, and he's and there we in this medieval village from the 1300, we're also producing some amazing wines and different activity, and also horse breeding and production of honey and different agricultural product.
So that's also part of your passion. You share that passion with your brother, your sister, and your father. That taste for wine and the countryside and all that.
Absolutely, something that is also important for my father and my brothers and sisters is the concept of sustainability. So everything that we do there is produced is completely sustainable. So there's a sustainable path that also my sister Victoria ensures in everything that we do. We have about 30% of the energy that we produce there that comes from solar panels. So we have our own energy, and then we also buy green certificates for the remainder, so that we don't have any, we reduce our direct impact in terms of CO2 emission. We don't use any pesticides also in the way that we treat also vineyards and all the agricultural products. So making extremely a product which is extremely sustainable and doesn't harm who is most important, which is our customers.
So, in terms of governance and making decisions, you as your branch, do you also have a family council for your branch in terms of the holdings that you have, like the hotel, the vineyards, the horse breeding, but also oversee the holdings of the Ferragamo in your branch, or is part of the whole family council of Ferragamo, the whole family, or how do you handle that?
Well, I think it's, everyone has different interests, and I think you need to allow those interests to be developed in an independent way. Then we have joint interests. So, for example, we have the Portrait Hotel in Milan, which is an old monastery that we just opened 2 years ago. And it's right in the center of the fashion district of Milan. Plus, we have another 3 hotels in Florence and one in Rome. And so that's another business. And so we have also in the hospitality as a shared business together.
With the rest of the family, or only your
Yes.
branch?
No, with all the family.
Okay.
And so this is something that we developed also we were able to develop it when we went public, as in terms of being able to then reinvest in this venture and this diversification. And so this is something that I think is, it's a way of being able to say, okay, you can develop your own project, but then also there are some projects which are done as a group. And so keeping that, I think it has to be let as free as possible. I think limitation can create a situation where then you don't create that sense of achievement or that ability to be somebody that can go and make it on their own, which I think is something that should always be at the forefront of what a family business member can do.
So you as a family have a lot of options. You have the hospitality business. Your uncle has the yacht business or boating industry. The winery also, and also the Ferragamo brand itself in the luxury brand. So these rules of only certain members of the family can work in the holdings, do they apply to all the businesses or only for the Ferragamo brand? How do you handle that in terms of, let's say, your daughter or your son holds up the hand, say, Dad, I want to work in the hospitality business. No, but there's also all these rules for you to work there, or they only apply for Ferragamo?
No, they all apply. I think they only apply for Ferragamo, although my father also applies them in Il Borro. He tries to limit. Of course, he is the first generation, so he needs the second generation to carry this forward. But he also wants to make sure that it doesn't become, a position, a job. Rather, it has to be a need for that job. And so he's very much about making sure that what's requested is something that is has a certain sense of reality to the needs of the business. So, and keeping it a healthy balance. Going back to the example that my grandmother decided to do, and giving them all 6 a specific role. I think you have to be able to slice and dice your business in a way that you can create responsibility, but it has to be for the business. It cannot be for a point of giving somebody a job, because then it might not be sustainable in the long term. You might have somebody that is not going to be happy doing something that they don't even want. And so I think it has to have the right balance for sure. Very tricky finding it.
So, what do you see the challenges as a family for the future in terms of the Ferragamo brand? About what's happening in the luxury business, the what the Chinese are doing all over the world in copying everything and coming there. So it's a lot of challenges. What do you see Ferragamo in the next 30 to 50 years as a family facing it forward?
Well, obviously there has been some two major trends. Okay, so one has been the trend of the LVMH and the Kering and the Richemont, which have been buying up different companies and creating this conglomerate that then are able to, let's say, muscle their way into the distribution to get the best real estate to where position their brands. And then there is also the other thought, which is more, I would probably even put Prada into this, even if it's Prada plus Miu Miu plus Church. And so there are others that have been able to be more as a single brand, able to still be able to develop the business and being able to make it by themselves. The Dolce Gabbana is another one, Armani is another one, and of course you have the mammoth Chanel and Hermes. So I think it doesn't necessarily have to be part of a group, but you do have to have a very clear identity, a very clear mindset and commitment to your customer, first and foremost, and understand what they want from your product and understand that your product has to be different from the other products because otherwise they would go and buy that product from somebody else. So it's understanding really, what is your reason of being in terms of company and making sure that you can then on that provide innovation, creativity, craftsmanship, true to your backbones of the company, which is quality and comfort. Those are two main elements among innovation, which were created by our founder, and that still today are why people buy Ferragamo.
The core values of the family still the same.
Yes, I
So
actually have a saying. I have a saying on my computer, which is a saying that Karl Lagerfeld said when he came to a presentation here in Florence, and he says, you have to adapt. We have to adapt to times, but times do not have to adapt to us. So, sometimes you have to be able to have those core value, but you have to be current to what the customer wants today. But at the same time, it has to be true to what the feel of that brand is all about.
maintaining legacy for future generations is a huge challenge once the family gets so big. So how do you as a family, the whole family, what do? You get together once a year, you share the history, you share time together. Do you have a family assembly or a family trip every year? How do you do it as a family to maintain this legacy and this livelihood of Ferragamo name in the family and the taste for life?
Well, as an Italian family, you can imagine that getting together is something that happens quite often. So we have continuous also meetings to ensure that we have the right governance between the holding company and what is the new course that we are designing and putting in place. And then, of course, different moments that we share with the different uncles and families that allows us to get together. We're also very lucky that having 23 cousins and 40 sons, offsprings from that, there are often ceremonies together, weddings, baptisms, and things like that are always an occasion to get together. And so with such a vast population, there are quite a lot of them that happen all the time. And then, of course, technology, we're continuously writing happy birthdays to each other on our group WhatsApp.
So maintaining history for the next generation, what have your family done in terms of putting together a book, the history of the family, updating it every now and then? What have you done as a family in terms of that? Because I've interviewed many families in my life, and always I say, do you have a book? Have you written something about? Oh, we have it in the bucket list, but we haven't done it. And say your dad is still alive, your grandmother is still alive. You do it because they're not gonna be there forever. So what have you done in that sense?
Well, Luca Guadagnino did actually a autobiography of Ferragamo, and
Okay.
we launched it in 2020, actually, in September 2020, and the Venice Film Festival.
Okay.
And it really tells a story about Salvatore, and so and his life, and it also has different depiction, also part of it with my grandmother in it, and and so that was one way that we create this story. My grandmother also was an incredible woman. She would write to all the 23 grandsons. She would send them a letter of different things which were very meaningful. I had a certain meaning or something that she learned in life, or she gave all of us, she gave us a silver doll, that had a weight at the bottom. And she showed us, sometimes you fall off track, but then it's important that you get back up and you go onto your path. It will happen that you're going to make mistakes and go off path, but it's important that you know that, and then you get back on path and you go straight. And so all of those symbols and writing is something that we always carry together. Also, my cousin Ginevra has written a second book, which actually puts all of this together, and really tells the stories of Ta, which is the name that we gave Wanda as our grandmother. And it really tells the story about her and all those important values that she bestowed on us.
Wow, what a great way to pursue and maintain the legacy alive. So to end this conversation, James, what would be those three things that you could give other families? Say, in my experience, what I've learned, these are the three things that you should be approaching in order to maintain and transcend from one generation to the other one. Talking about a company that is almost 100 years old. In the next couple of years, it's going to be 100 years. I'm sure it is going to be a huge celebration in that sense. So, what would
Yes.
be those three recommendations and learnings of your family to maintain this family together and going forward?
First of all, is passion. It's ensuring that that passion is always kept alive. And with all the history we have, with the 14,000 pairs of shoes that we have in our archive, and that exhibition that reminds us every year of that creativity and that pursuit that was done from all the family members, including my aunts and my father and uncles and my grandmother and everybody. Always a constant reminder of our job, our ability to bring this forward in terms of legacy. And what's important, I think, is to always remember that we want to leave it better than we found it. It's something that it's important that we understand that we are here for to pass the baton to somebody else later on, and be lucky to be able to pass it in better condition than we actually received it. And so that's something that keeps us all very much on our toes, because I'm sure and we believe that there is definitely somebody up there which is looking at us, making sure we are, maybe even helping us, making sure we're making the right decisions. And so I think that that's important. And then at the last point is understanding that a family and the complexity of a family evolves in time. And it is something that has to always be part of the equation. And it should not be something that we, as family members, ignore. It's something that needs to be looked at ahead of time. I think it's important that it's the family members should be able to confront those issues ahead of time, be able to do them before they find themselves in a situation of struggle, understand how to do it in a way that it's always fair, and it can be done independently to make it fair, so that it doesn't feel too personal in some moments where it shouldn't put anybody in a situation of uncomfort. And so creating those mechanisms that can then create a situation of growth, for a bigger, better situation for the future.
Well, one last thing, and I was wondering because the logo of Ferragamo has been somebody's like a trademark. So who created that logo, and has it been always the same one?
No, we actually, the logo that we currently have now, incidentally, was actually the logo that was an interpretation of a logo that was done by Lucio Venna, which was a contemporary artist in the 1930s.
Mhm.
And together with my grandfather, he designed that logo for him, which was in block letter, and it was done more of a wave, and it was written Ferragamo Creations, Florence, Italy. And so then after we created the name, which was Salvatore Ferragamo, as his signature. But recently we renamed the brand back to what it was, which was just Ferragamo. Salvatore Ferragamo never named himself by his first name. He always just named his products by the name Ferragamo. And so this is a little bit the story of how we're going through this rebranding and bringing forward this update to the brand.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time. I'm sure that this
Thank you, Alex.
podcast is going to be well received by all the family around the world. And thank you very much, James, for
Thank you,
taking
Alex.
the time. And it was a pleasure, by the way, meeting you over at the Edge in Barcelona. I
Yes,
hope to see you again soon, maybe in El Borro, taking a
absolutely.
good
Come and visit
a good
us.
glass of wine.
Yes, we will very much enjoy seeing you there. And thank you again for your time and for giving me this opportunity. I'm really happy.
No, and if you ever come to Mexico, please, you're going to be my guest here.
You're very kind. Thank you, Alex.
Take
Have a
care, my
good day.
friend. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on this episode of Business in Families. My conversation with James Ferragamo left us with powerful insights about what it truly takes for a family business not just to survive, but to thrive across generations. First, passion is essential, but it's not enough. As James said, without structure, passion doesn't scale. Second, female leadership can be transformational. Wanda built a lasting structure from continuity. Third, clarity brings harmony. Limiting third-generation family involvement to just 3 roles was crucial in avoiding future conflict. Fourth, governance must come before crisis. It's better to prepare than to react, James reminded us. And finally, family business is about more than the family. Our longtime partners and collaborators are part of our extended family. If any of these resonates with your story or your company and would like to explore how to apply these lessons in your own family business, I would be happy to talk. Follow us on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcast. And share this episode with anyone building a lasting legacy, because generational continuity isn't an accident. It's a choice we make every day. See you in the next episode.